Hello, this is Dale the librarian here. I wanted to help you out with some of those resources in looking at the influence on media, but there's some places in the library that it's easier to just show you in video format. And hopefully I've got like the video going on here so you can see me sipping my delicious coffee this morning. When you're at the library homepage, www.lib.utah.edu, you won't necessarily have access to this unless you come into the Marriott Library and ask for a guest pass at the opening, at the entrance to the library. So once you've done that, you can come, and maybe, I can help you find some of these resources too, and maybe send some your way, but best practice would be to come in and then you can experience it yourself. These don't have a remote access license unless you belong as a student, staff, or faculty member of the University of Utah. So for what it's worth. When you're at the library homepage, there's USearch, which is the main catalog, and you could certainly search for your keywords there. That one is an open search. I don't think, for the most part, you'll be prompted for a login until you want to see an electronic resource, like an ebook or an article or something like that. But let me show you what's going on. In the research databases, we have access to a whole bunch of different scholarly articles, some scholarly videos or curriculum that are being taught in class. But one of the cool things that we have is complete runs of newspapers. So we have like the complete run back to the Civil War, like the New York Times. We've got the LA Times, the San Francisco, I think it's the Chronicle. At any rate, I can show you how to find those. But I'll show you another database as well. So if you go into databases by type and go down to newspapers, this again, you have to come into the library to see this. The first one that I'm going to show you, way down at the bottom of the list, is called US Newsstream. This is most of the US newspapers. It's mostly English. There's some Spanish-speaking, though. And this goes back, unfortunately, to the mid-90s. So for the trial, the arrest and trial 1991-92, it might not have that data set that we're looking for. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to go in there. But it'll certainly have the effect well into this century. When you're looking for search terms, if you have a phrase like somebody's name, put it in quote marks. So I've got Jeffrey Dahmer. If there was something ambiguous about the search term, say you were looking for rights, free speech, or something like that that might have different ways of saying it, I would say look for synonyms. And in this case, you might look for serial killer. But I think if we're looking for the effect of this person's name, if it's like a copycat killer, the newspaper article will refer back to that original iconic name. So let's see what's in here. And we're looking across a whole bunch of different years for trends and subject terms. But let me show you what I'm talking about. You could search for anything, whatever shows up in newspapers. So there's 12,000 results. When you're looking at this, there's articles from 1992, and this is saved by kind of a relevancy rating. You can see how they're sorted. So you can sort by oldest or most recent. The relevancy rating looks for a number of keywords, and there's some algorithm built into it. So for what it's worth, it's not necessarily the best at the top. When you go down on the left-hand side of the screen, though, you're going to see this chart here, and what this equals is the number of times that something has appeared. So you can see in 1992, the name shows up like 1,903 times. That's a lot for obvious reasons. It was a sensational trial. And then it slowly goes down. But then right here, there's a spike. And what year is that? 2002, there was a spike. How can you look at that in particular? Or how do you look at particular decades? Is all you have to do is take the slider and you can go and click on update, and it takes a while to stir through on this database. So now we're working from 2002 to 2018, and now the trends are completely different. It's not that smooth downturn, but you can see that there's peaks and valleys. What I would ask you to look for is if there's a trend, if something went up, it might be because there's a consensus of something that happened in the media and they're hearkening back to that person's name. How do you do that? Let's just click on 1 year. Is it going to let me? Okay, so now I'm just going into 2007, just as an example. Okay, so there's a crackdown on animal torture, and Jeffrey Dahmer was used as a rhetorical device for changing people's minds. But there's like religion mixed in, serial killer. Oh, look at this. There's a case, Walsh case reviewed for Dahmer link. How do you find those connections? You can go through all 318 articles, but you can also go through the subjects. And when you click on the subjects, these are the main subjects that the author or the editor of the newspaper put in there regarding that particular article. For newspapers, it's not as robust. So this is a discovery point, but not a huge thing. But if you click on more, you can see what was being talked about in regards to Jeffrey Dahmer at that time. So cruelty to animals in 2000, whatever the date that we had. So you could go into each one of these subjects and you could start to build evidence for your paper and talk about, well, in this moment there was a media influence talking about cruelty to animals. And maybe this was a rise with something else that came on in the media, maybe an animal rights organization. You get to decide, but there's usually not something in a bubble, but they're trying to help people understand in that journalistic sensibility a complex topic by throwing back old references. And they're like, it's kind of like this, it's kind of like this. Is that media influence? You get to decide. But let me show you another database. Oh, and by the way, when you're at the library, all of these are full text. So you can see examples. And sometimes the articles are really long, like several paragraphs, and sometimes they're really super short. So let's go back to the library homepage. And I'm going to go to newspapers again. And this time I'll show you New York Times, a complete run of newspapers. Oh, here we go. New York Times Historic. So this one runs 1851 to 2013. The US news stream that we looked at before, you can narrow down to publication 2 and find the rest of the New York Times. New York Times is considered a national newspaper that leans a little bit to the left. So for what it's worth, when you're looking at newspapers, you might go to the Wikipedia page and see if they have a political bias that leans left or right. Oftentimes it'll show up in Wikipedia so you can see, but that might be part of your consideration as well. Because in this case, Jeffrey Dahmer had a whole bunch of different psychological things that he was diagnosed with, and maybe somebody that leans left or leans right in a newspaper might use that as a rhetorical device to talk about, to push some agenda. Loving Jeffrey Dahmer. There we go. 1994. Again, a national newspaper, so this has a higher editorial level. But you can see the date ranges are a lot more diverse, but that's because the number of articles are much smaller. So there's only like 12, because this is just one newspaper. So this is a great way to do it too. But let's go into our current century, so 2000, and let's look at those subject headings and see if the New York Times presents it in a different way. And this is media analysis. You are doing media analysis by doing this. Oh, they don't have subject heading. Oh, fiddlesticks. Oh, rats. Oh, that's a bummer. Oh my gosh. Examining a religion minus the Osmonds. Utah connection right there. Oh, it's South Park. Never mind. Random reference. So you can go through these and look for trends as well. But I'm bummed that you can't look at the subject line. There must be some way around that. Lastly, when you're going to search on the open web, and I'm going to pull down my browser just a little bit so you can see this, there is something called Google Scholar. This has articles that you can have access to at the Marriott Library. You'd have to come in or ask me, and I might be able to get them to you. But if you look for, again, Jeffrey Dahmer, this is only looking in scholarly articles. It's not everything that's out there. So, and I can help you interpret some of these things as well. What I would like you to look for, though, is this cited by. How many times has it been cited? Is something called impact. So if you have something that other people use in their citation list, it means that the authority, just by consensus of being cited, is going up a little bit. So you can use that as a device to figure out whether something is going to work or not. But I'm going to do Jeffrey Dahmer media. And in Google, you don't have to put and, whereas in the other databases, you might have to do that. Did it look for media? Oh, there we go. Public reactions. Story. That's interesting. Oh, how the media generate myths. Okay. So there's some good stuff in here. And if you see these ones that say .gov, the United States government is obliged by law to put stuff out there for free. And if you can't get it, then you can do a Freedom of Information Act and ask for something. So if it's a GOV, you can actually see the report. What is this? Oh, it's a reference to a police training manual. How fascinating. Not relevant, but it's interesting. So another thing you can do, and this is kind of a last-ditch effort. I would say the library databases are going to be more effective. But whatever you want to search for on Google, you can search for in context. So if you put in Jeffrey Dahmer and a colon, and then type in whatever words you want. So I'm going to do media, but no spaces. It'll use Jeffrey Dahmer as the context for your search. Let's see if it works. And so you get some of this pop stuff. Psychology Today, that's pop, that's not scholarly. 9 mind-blowing quotes by Jeffrey Dahmer is not scholarly. I would not necessarily use these, but it might help you look for ideas. Oh my gosh, this is just junk. Oh, here's Chicago Tribune from '92. Here's an encyclopedia. History.com, not scholarly. Okay. That did not work out very well. Ooh, look at that. Mythologies of Violence in Postmodern Media. Oh my gosh, that looks good. When was this published? About this book. Oh, published in 1999. So look in the library catalog. If you find a book that's kind of close, you can go to the library catalog and see other ones like it. So remember, you just search for something in quotes, violence in postmodern media. I don't know if we'll have it. Oh, look at that, we have it. So if you want to see that book, you can come into the library. But if you click on something that looks interesting, you can look for Jeffrey Dahmer in the catalog too. You can click on what's called the record. Whoa. And then you can see some subjects that the Library of Congress has put in there. So if you wanted to look on violence in motion pictures, television and motion pictures can be construed as media. You get to decide what your medium for your media is. So I hope this helps. I'll try and send some more ideas via the email. Have a good one.